Governor Gretchen Whitmer declared a state of emergency over the weekend to bring more energy to Michigan home.
20% of our economy is tied to the auto industry, which depends on a steady flow of goods from our largest and closest trading partners.
I would say in the last month, we've seen gas price wars, which we never really experienced too much before.
Cars line up for blocks, engines humming idly as drivers glance nervously at price boards looming over nearly empty pumps. Some stations have run dry while others cap sales at a few gallons per customer. The roots of this crisis trace back to Alberta, Canada's oil hub, now choked by new restrictions after Ottawa slashed exports in response to Washington's latest tariffs. What started as a cross-border policy spat has spiraled into daily hardship, driving gasoline prices skyward and straining freight networks that deliver food and essentials across the Midwest. Governors are raising alarms, demanding swift action, while experts warn time is running out. Without restored fuel flows, the northern U.S. faces shortages that could ripple through every home and business. The question looms: how deep will this crisis cut? And how far will its fallout spread? It began in the Pacific Northwest, where Washington's long border with British Columbia once ensured steady fuel and trade. Ports in Seattle and Tacoma, gateways to Alberta's oil, now sit at the heart of a breakdown. Ottawa's export cuts, retaliation for tariffs, hit like a shockwave. Overnight, shipments plummeted by over half. Storage tanks that kept the region fueled dropped to historic lows, and tankers that once carried Alberta's crude left docks empty. The response was immediate and harsh. Gas stations in Seattle, Spokane, and Bellingham hung out-of-fuel signs or rationed dwindling supplies. Lines stretched for blocks, with drivers queuing before dawn for 8 or 10 gallons at best. By week's end, prices soared past $6 a gallon, levels unseen in over 2 decades. In rural areas, pumps ran dry entirely, stranding whole communities. The economic toll hit hard. Washington's fishermen, reliant on diesel for Puget Sound runs, kept boats docked, watching a season's catch vanish. Shipping firms canceled a third of their routes, disrupting supply chains. Apple and cherry growers on the brink of harvest worried not about picking fruit, but whether it would ever reach markets. Analysts warned of worse to come. Fuel prices could hit $7 a gallon, port traffic could collapse, and small businesses dependent on trucking might shutter permanently. In Michigan, the crisis unfolded with equal force. The state, birthplace of America's automotive giants, leans heavily on crude flowing through Line 5 and Enbridge pipelines from Alberta. Export cuts sent shockwaves within days. Fuel reserves in Detroit, Flint, and Grand Rapids fell to critical levels, with prices jumping from $3.95 to $4.65 in a week. Stations limited sales to 10 gallons, and industries felt the strain. Michigan's role as a Great Lakes transport hub amplified the impact, with canceled trucking routes to Ohio and Illinois clogging warehouses. Frozen food distributors in Detroit reported spoilage as trucks idled. Auto plants in Detroit, Dearborn, and Lansing slowed production, cut shifts, and sent workers home as parts deliveries faltered. Governor Gretchen Whitmer declared an energy emergency, releasing state reserves and extending truckers' hours. Calls grew for Washington to negotiate with Ottawa, while temporary measures like suspending fuel taxes were considered. Yet Michigan's reliance on Alberta's pipelines laid bare its vulnerability. In New York, the shortage hit communities along the St. Lawrence River, Jefferson, Franklin, and St. Lawrence counties, dependent on fuel from Quebec and Ontario. Stations closed or cut hours, forcing rural families to drive 50 or 60 miles for gas, only to find rationed supplies. In Watertown and Plattsburgh, drivers lined up before dawn, hoping for limited fills. Ambulances got priority, but public transit routes were slashed, and freight carriers reduced schedules. Prices spiked over 30% in a week, hitting $5.30 to $5.50 a gallon in border towns, the highest in years. The crisis reshaped daily life, adding costs and burdens to farmers and small businesses. Minnesota faced similar struggles, tied to pipelines from Manitoba and Ontario. As Canadian crude slowed, shortages emerged fast. In Minneapolis, major chains like BP, Holiday, and Speedway capped sales at 10 to 12 gallons. Duluth introduced a rotating fuel schedule, designating hours for neighborhoods to access pumps.